My name is Kobi. I'm a professor of artificial intelligence at Ben-Gurion University. My research interests focus on the use of AI for the social good and in the design of systems for collaboration between humans and computers. The radicalization pipeline refers to a process by which people are exposed to increasingly radical content as they access and consume social media. This pipeline has been documented both in academic papers as well in the popular media. And the idea is that as people spend more time on popular sites like YouTube and Facebook, they provide information to algorithms that use this information to get them to stay longer on the site. And they do this by providing them with recommendations about what kind of content to consume. And there is increasing awareness of the fact that this content contains radical behavior. It is not specifically designed to increase the level of radicalized content it shows. It happens naturally because the engineers are trying to get people to stay inside the social media sphere and consume as much content as possible because this is good for their advertisers. So it's a kind of a side effect as far as the social media companies are concerned. But indeed, this side effect has actual ramifications for us since it lets the extreme content into the back door and people consume this content and it may affect them. There is several papers showing proof that people who have carried out attacks in the real world did so after being exposed to online radical behavior. So this makes it imperative to be able to understand why people consume this type of content and how we can detect ahead of time whether they may become consumers of such content. In a study we conducted, we looked at 3 types of radical ideology: the dark web, the alt-light movement, and the alt-right movement. And we had a database that was prepared for us by social scientists who were able to document certain YouTube channels with respect to their level of radicalization within these 3 groups. The idea behind our study was to use machine learning to try to predict whether people who have accessed content that is at a lower level of radicalization will mature to access content in the future that is of a higher level of radicalization. The algorithms rely on several types of information. The first type of information is what movies do people consume? In the context of YouTube, we do not have access to that interaction process. But what we do have access is comments. We can we can access the logs of people's comments, textual comments on movies when they choose to provide them. And that gives us a kind of a proxy to say that if someone has indeed commented on a movie, then that person must have felt engaged with the topic. They may have had something, whether positive or negative, to say, and we can assume that they have consumed or watched that video. And then another aspect of input that we look at is how often people log on and consume content. And we can tell that because we know when someone has started a new session, and we know the lag that has passed between several instances of comments, and the algorithm indeed uses that information. And it's also logical, right? Because if someone starts consuming content more rapidly, and the lag between movies decreases, then we might conclude that that person has started some form of a drop into a rabbit hole that we should be careful about. One interesting result of the study is that we were able to show that we can reach high levels of prediction performance even with just a week's worth of data. Obviously, the more data I have about a person, the more comments that person provides to YouTube, the better understanding I have of that person's mental psyche, and the algorithm is able to pick up on it. But we were able to reach good performance even with only a few days of data. Of course, the algorithm may still make mistakes, but it is interesting to note that it doesn't need a lot to get it going. So how can we use the AI algorithm for the better of the social good? A natural way to do it is we contend that practitioners, say for example, NGOs that care about mitigating radicalized behavior in the population, they are able to use such algorithms in a transparent way to detect individuals, like I said, at risk of radicalization. They haven't done anything wrong. It's completely legal to consume movies on YouTube, for example, but reach out and try to perform some kind of controlled intervention that has the goal of steering them away from the pipeline end. And the way to do it is multifold. So this is exactly part of what DRAD is all about. It's understanding how we can reverse the radicalization trend by providing people with better information, by connecting them with individuals who have perhaps been down that path and have repented, or by alerting law enforcement if that is necessary. We hope that it isn't. But the potential of the algorithm is to be used along each of these spheres. Recently, we have seen a flurry of activity with trained models for online chat, also known as ChatGPT. Now, these models are heavily data-driven. They've been trained on gigabytes and gigabytes of human-generated text on the internet. And they are coming ever closer to providing general artificial intelligence in the sense that they can help people with a variety of tasks in a way that is similar to that of a human helper. Now, it turns out that there are also multiple ways in which this kind of technology may be compromised that is highly relevant for the DRAD project. One example is the Microsoft chatbot, otherwise known as TIE, that was adaptive very much to their users. And the problem with that capability is that you need to have bells and whistles that are able to provide kind of a balance that is able to stop the adaptation when it can get dangerous. With respect to TIE, that chatbot learned to become a racist chatbot within a matter of hours because it was exposed to certain individuals who had that kind of agenda. And that caused a lot of embarrassment, and it was a big faux pas for Microsoft. And since that day, the chatbots have evolved to include bells and whistles when they are attempted to being manipulated in order to fulfill some goal that may not be socially conducive. Another issue that we have to contend with when using machine learning to detect and to mitigate radicalized behavior is bias. There is increasing evidence both in research and a lot of media and public awareness of the fact that predictive algorithms that make decisions that affect our lives reflect bias that already exists in society. And this is because these algorithms are heavily data-driven, but the data that they input and crank up in the algorithm is generated by a biased society. For example, with respect to minorities or people that receive income support. And we need to be very careful that the algorithm's prediction take into account the fact that they could be wrong, and especially with respect to minorities. For example, if we are about to determine that an individual is maybe at danger of becoming radicalized, we need to consider the fact that this is a false positive, basically that the algorithm is incorrect. And we need to be very careful about that before we go ahead and do some kind of intervention. This is especially true with respect to minorities. We want to minimize the effect of false positives on the quality of life of these individuals. The take-home from my study is that we need to be very careful when applying AI to radicalization detection because it may have an adverse effect on individuals. And indeed, one conclusion I think that is worth considering is the fact that that there is an increasing awareness in the public that technological development should be halted or reconsidered while progress is being made on the legislation side. Because if you really think about it, the correct way to combine technology and society is a bottom-up approach. We need to work both on the technology that learns from data and that helps increase the quality of our lives by creating all of this wonderful assistant agents, but also on regulation and legislation that will protect the rights of individuals within that society. And I think that DRAD is taking exactly the right approach between these two extremes.